am I up to here? I'm in my composing shed and I'm playing Alexander's Ragtime Band by Irving Berlin, published in 1911. But I'll stop there because what I'm doing is completely illegal. Because Alexander's Ragtime Band, published in 1911, written by Irving Berlin, who died in 1989 at a very grand old age of nearly 100, and it is still copyright. This music is still copyright in the European Union, but I am reading it off my iPad here. The music is on Wikipedia. Wikipedia, so far as I know, does not distinguish what country you're in. Wherever your country you're in, or at least in the Western world, it lets you have whatever information is on Wikipedia. Alexander's Ragtime Band is not copyright in the United States because the United States operates a rule called the rule of the shorter term, which means that works, I believe it means that works that were written before 1925 have automatically come out of copyright now. However, the European Union applies a rule which is strictly 70 years after the death of the author, or the death of the last of the authors in the case of a work with multiple authors. So this means that since Berlin died in 1989 and 70 years copyright will be applied from that date in the European Union, and that includes the UK, and it will continue to include the UK after the UK has left the European Union, because we're continuing to apply European law. All European law is being carried over into EU law, or law is being carried over into British law. So the copyright, according to the EU, is 70 years from 1989, and that gets us to 2059. Alexander's Ragtime Band will still be in copyright in 2059. It was written in 1911, so it will have been in copyright for 148 years. This is absolutely ludicrous, and this shows the ridiculous state of copyright law. And the fact also that I can get the music, I can simply go onto Wikipedia, I can look at the images there, and somebody has put an image of every page of the work onto Wikipedia because the work is not copyright in the United States. However, if I try to use the online score library, the IMSLP library, if I try to use my IMSLP app and I look at Alexander's Ragtime Band on my iPad, I get a page which says this page contains no files downloadable via this app. Please visit the website page instead. And if I then visit the website page, I get a message saying this work is most likely not public domain in either Canada or other countries where the term is life plus 50 years, or in EU countries where the copyright term is life plus 70 years. However, as this work was first published before 1925 or failed to meet notice or renewal requirements, it is almost certainly public domain in the USA and is therefore hosted on an American server for US residents only. And then further down it has an American flag next to the title Complete Score, and it says New York, Ted Snyder Publishing, 1911. This work is public domain in the USA, Canada, USA only. It is not public domain in Canada, the EU, or elsewhere. And I can't even get the picture of the music cover, but that's the music cover looked like that. Nice music covers they did in those days. So what's going on with copyright law? Why is it so extraordinarily long for these really classic pieces of music, which you would have thought would have entered the public domain ages ago? They're exactly the pieces that people want to adapt, reuse, improvise on, use for their own purposes. Copyright law has got completely out of sync with any natural justice, and this is because it's been repeatedly adjusted to favour large companies, so that the large companies that hold the copyrights on long established popular works can continue to milk the copyright for profit, for completely unearned profit, for years and years. Now, as a composer, I recognise that copyright is important and it should extend for a certain amount of time after the work has been created. It should certainly extend the lifetime of the creator. I think there's even an argument for it extending for the lifetime of the spouse of the creator, because that spouse had to live with that creative artist and had to put up with everything and probably had a part, at least passively, in the creation of the works or supporting the work's creation. And you could even argue that maybe it should descend down to children, although I'm not sure about that. But now copyright is descending down to grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the people who created the works, and this is completely unjust. These works should be in the public domain, and the fact that they're not limits creativity and it limits our culture. It stunts the reuse. In this applies to music, but also poetry, for example. Composers want to set lyrics that have been written in the past, but they're often still copyright. Often they can't, because the copyrights are held either by the descendants of the original creators who don't want to cooperate with the creation of new artistic works. They just want to, because they think there might not be much money in that, so they just want to leave things as they are. Or the copyrights sometimes fall into hands of organisations like societies that represent artists in various ways, and they have been left these copyrights, and they are run by administrators whose job it is to extract as much profit out of them as possible, and so they will try and charge at extortionate fees. So what this means is that small-time composers like me can't get permission to use old lyrics or perform pieces based on music that is well known but still in copyright, but a long way back, or the words were written a long way back and are very well known, but they're still copyright and we can't use them. And it doesn't help us. The vast majority of artistic creators, the state of copyright simply isn't helping them. The copyright law is just defending the vested interests of few people taking the profits from large companies, in my opinion. And here's another point. Let's think of a famous piece of classical music. Let's think of the most famous thing we can, maybe Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. That was written in 1808. If that had been in copyright for the same amount of time in the EU as Alexander's Ragtime Band is going to be in copyright, 148 years, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, written in 1808, would have come out of copyright in 1956. That means for whole of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, people would not have been free to make use of that music, to put it in films, to use it to adapt it, to parody it, to use it republish it, arrange it for all kinds of different groups and instruments, use it for so many purposes, which it obviously was used for, and all these classical works were used for. All these activities would have been illegal. You would have had to pay to do them. This would have had such a chilling, stunting effect on the way that classical music was distributed through our culture. It's very fortunate that that didn't happen. So the state of the law that it now is like it's closing a door on something that has been allowed and has been highly profitable to the development of music in the past. This freedom, this public domain distribution, adaptation, freedom. It's closing the door on that, and it's saying that from henceforth these things are locked, and you have to get permission from these arbitrary, bizarre copyright holders to use them. And this is just bizarre, that we are applying a completely new standard now to how the culture that we've inherited and we have built up from, how we have taken that and how we have benefited from that. It's like the man who climbs the greasy pole and then removes it so that people can't follow him up. It's like the reverse of social mobility. And it's simply to benefit a small number of companies. I could name a few of them, like the Disney Company and Universal Artists, United Music Publishers. But it's a few companies, Warner Brothers. It's Time Warner. It's a few large companies dominating media interests who have fixed this situation, this anti-cultural situation, to their own advantage. So this has been a bit of a rant about copyright law. I don't know how we can change this. The situation should be more like patent law, where a patent is only, I think it's originally it was 20 years. I think it's still 20 years, but it's extendable if you can apply to have it extended. And that means that the original creator has a reasonable amount of time to try and exploit their invention. But after a while, others are free to use that initial inspiration and to extend it and develop it. And that seems to be how culture and invention and human creativity should progress. And when it becomes excessively defended by laws that apply over centuries, as we're seeing now with these music copyrights, it really prevents progress. So Alexander's Ragtime Band, in copyright for 148 years in the EU. I will not live to see the day when people can just download that work off the internet and perform it, adapt it, play it, improvise on it, do whatever they will without paying somebody for the privilege of doing so, and somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with Irving Berlin, nothing to do with his relatives, and has no right in natural justice to extract any profit from that work anymore. That's an extreme example, but it is typical of what has happened now with copyright, and particularly in the EU. And I wish there was some way that creative artists of all types could get together and pressurize the lawmakers to change this unjust situation. So, thank you for listening to my rant, and sometime in the future I'll be back to playing my own works or playing other classic pieces or saying something else about the musical scene. So from the composing shed, it's good evening from me.